You know what? I'm gonna put my real mask on. They don't have masks on, so mine's off.
Mine's off too.
A few companies like that left in PA, but over the last 14 years, we've developed a unique process and patented the process that takes gas well wastewater. We convert it to fresh water that meets the US EPA secondary drinking water standard. We recover sodium chloride, calcium chloride, lithium chloride, methanol, and oil, all of which we sell back into the commercial markets. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about what we do, how we got to do what we do, and about what we hope to build in Susquehanna County to take care of wastewater from Susquehanna County as well. There'll be no wastewater we get at this plant. It isn't already here. Our customers are customers who are already here. They're recycling water. That means they're taking it from pad to pad, maybe from pad to one of the water treatment locations that's here already, 2 or 3 of them in Susquehanna County that I'm aware of. We get a fair amount of water at our plant in Standing Stone from Susquehanna County. The difference is we turn the water into fresh water. And I'll talk about our processes. I'll talk 3 or 4 times. I'll stop rather 3 or 4 times during the presentation. If anybody has any questions, shout them out and I'll do my best to answer. I have Gerald Bogdan, our VP of Engineering, here with me. He's been with us as a subcontractor consultant when we started the business in 2008. He's been on full-time since 2012. There'll be a few other gentlemen that step in the room later, my COO and CFO. A lot of experience there. The one gentleman knows an awful lot about the co-products we sell. They're on the road here to Philadelphia. They should be here any minute. So with that, I'll pick up. I'm going to try to stay out of the road. I apologize if you can't see me. I hope you can see the screen. This is just a simple timeline. It talks about what we did. We started business and we conceived the idea in 2007. We built our first plant in Williamsport in 2008. No surprise to anybody here, but it's a surprise to us. In 2008, what did we do? We physically, chemically treated water like folks around here still do, like some producers still do. And the idea was to treat it there, discharge it to Williamsport's Sanitary Authority Municipal POTW. We were told what the water would be like, but about a month and a half or 2 months into operation, we found out very quickly that the water in the Marcellus, in the northeast Marcellus, is different than water anywhere else in the world. It's got a lot more dissolved solids in it, a lot more sodium, a lot more calcium. We were unable to discharge water to the municipal POTW in the volumes we had hoped to, so we immediately started to look for new technology that would remove things that were dissolved in the water. That's what we did, and that's what we still do. So by 2012, sorry, my eyes aren't good without my glasses, but I think I can follow this timeline. By 2012, we were distilling water. We expanded the plant there. What did distilling water do? Distilling water meant we were making a pretty clean water. The dissolved minerals were gone from it, but anything that was volatile or organic still wasn't, so biological substances or VOCs, which the sewer plant was able to treat, were still in the water. So we were able to accept the water we were contracted to accept. We gave the distilled water to the municipality to treat through their sewer plant, which we pay them a fee for. And then we greatly reduced the stream so there was a concentrated drying. The calcium chloride was a lot industry folks used that we would haul to disposal in Ohio. It's still a dirty process, but a better process. So at the same time, we were trying to figure out how do we get distilled water, how do we get the minerals out of the product that we're distilling? How do we start to concentrate to a point where things start to drop out of the water? The first thing that drops out is salt. So we looked at crystallization. A lot of industry folks and a lot of folks around here would say there's no way Eureka you can do what you do, it's too expensive. Since we make commercial grade product and can sell it, our costs are very high to do what we do, but we sell the co-product. So we don't make money just by taking the water from a treater. We make the lion's share of our income by selling the salt, the calcium, the lithium, and those other co-products, and that's what I'll talk about here a little bit later. Last year was the first year that we started to produce lithium chloride. We make a very low grade, 4,000 ppm lithium chloride. In order to get to batteries or solar panels or lithium grease, you've got to get to 30% and then convert it to a lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide. With all the water we're currently getting at our facilities, we don't have enough volume coming in to do that commercially, make it commercially viable. When we get extra volume from Susquehanna County, then we will be converting our lithium chloride and our calcium to dry product and shipping it to the East Coast and around the United States. And a little bit later, I'll talk about what those products are used for, and from a mineral production standpoint, what that means to Pennsylvania and the country. This is a very simple picture of what we do. Our process is patented. We have 4 U.S. patents. 2 of them protect the process from the moment the truck drops the water off until the drop of distilled water leaves the plant. 2 of the patents protect how do you get it from distilled water to actually meet the secondary drinking water standard. And the state Pennsylvania DEP's de-wasting standard, which nobody except Eureka has ever done. That's the second 2 patents. We also have 2 Canadian patents, 1 for each of those processes. That just protects our technology. The patents are process patents. There's no new equipment in the plant that you can't see somewhere else. It's how do you put the different processes together. Do you have a question?
Yeah, you keep talking about secondary drinking water. What do you mean secondary?
You want to ask that, Joe? I'll get to it in a second.
That reference basically refers to limits that the EPA sets for a given set of pollutants that they identify as primary and then secondary. So primary would be things like coliform, solids, the primary pollutants that are of concern in drinking water. Okay, and this is countrywide, nationwide. And then the secondary reference is simply the next set of parameters that the EPA focuses on in their drinking water permits. Okay, so what Dan's referring to is the fact that our process takes the brine coming into the plant, and we can achieve secondary drinking water standards, that second level of parameters that the EPA sets for drinking water. So it's nothing more than a point of reference. We're not in the market to make drinking water out of this material.
That's my point. It's not
Correct. We're just disclosing that because our process is so intensive and robust that we're able to even meet drinking water standards, even though we're not targeting that as a goal. That's the point. You're welcome.
This is basically a picture showing just in color what I was just describing that we do. So we take the produced water. Probably a pointer in this darn thing in there, Jared?
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't work. Doesn't matter. The brown dot at the top, that's depicting produced water coming into our plant. We focus on getting the dirtiest water, but somebody might say, who do you get your water from? We focus on produced water. That's the water that comes out of the well with the gas. We do not focus on frac water. Flowback water. Flowback water is lower in contaminants, lower in dissolved minerals. We want the dissolved minerals. We'll take both, but we're focused on produced water. The other unique thing about produced water is 30, 40, 50 years from now, when they aren't fracking any more wells, they'll still be produced water. As long as the gas are flowing gas, there's water coming out. We want that water. We're a long-term solution for the water that's always going to come out of the ground because we don't depend on having any of our water go back to a producer for reuse. It can. Producers take it back, but they don't take it all back. In the wintertime, when it's really cold, we're still getting produced water, but they aren't doing any completions. Historically, by November or December, a lot of them are out of budgets for completions, so they aren't fracking. and they aren't flowing back, where does the water go? Some of them hold it in big pits, a whole bunch of them bring it up. Our busiest months are January, February, March, until they get back into the swing of things with completions. But we want to produce water, and we can take it forever because we aren't dependent on them taking any back. We have two processes we use to distill the water. A distiller, imagine that name, and a crystallizer. A crystallizer can take water that's a lot more concentrated in dissolved contaminants. A distiller can take water that's less concentrated in contaminants. So examples, gathering station water from a company like Williams or UGI or any of those folks, it's low in dissolved solids. If you put it to a crystallizer, you won't get very many co-products out, and you'll waste the capacity of your crystallizer. Produced water, being the worst, is the highest in dissolved minerals. So you get a lot of salt, a lot of calcium, a lot of lithium out of that water. That's the water we want. That's why we have two processes, not just one. After you boil the water in both of those machines, and that's really what you're doing, you're boiling the water. Folks used to say in the Barnett Shale and other places you visited and researched over the years, oh, when you distill the water, you can do anything with it. You can't do anything with this water once you distill it. It still has volatile organics, COD, other things that boil at a temperature lower than water. That's what the rest of our process focuses on. All the rest of our process. To make the cleanest water we can and get the most minerals out. So after we distill it and/or crystallize it, we extract calcium chloride as a brine. You basically boil the brine. You get the calcium out dry. You end up with a smaller waste stream. You take the lithium out as a chloride, which you convert to a carbonate or hydroxide. And I don't want to get too technical. I'm happy to go as technical as anybody wants. I'm trying to do this relatively quickly, but I'm happy to answer questions. Okay? And then what's left at the end, after it goes through the de-wasting process, okay, which is something we worked on for what, 4 years? It took us 4 years to figure out how to get this water to meet that standard we talked about. We went from lab to bench to pilot, back to bench, back to pilot, up to full scale. It was quite difficult. That's why one of the reasons we patented the process. Gerald will talk a lot more about the water and the water quality when I get through the introduction here. Okay. Doing all this and extracting all those co-products is how we can offer the service we offer. If we weren't selling those co-products, and if they weren't commercial grade marketable, the salt is pool salt, sold under the Clorox brand pool salt name. The calcium chloride will be de-icing. Currently it's sold back into the oil and gas region, but not so much here. Mostly in southwest PA and Ohio. To weight down the wells, the formation's deeper there, they need heavier water to control the wells. But we want to get away from the oil and gas-based sale of our co-product, because I said earlier in the presentation they won't be around forever. So we want to get our market to go to the calcium market, it will be de-icing. Lithium, we know what we use lithium for. The lithium will go to a live end or an Albemarle, and we'll actually have it converted to calcium or lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide. So it'll be used for solar batteries, solar panels, lithium grease. The United States currently consumes about 25 to 26,000 tons of lithium a year. We produce less than 6,000 domestically. All the rest is imported from China, Bolivia, a couple other countries, Chile, Australia, so most of it's imported. Likewise, the calcium chloride in the Northeast, 90% of it that we use lands on our eastern shore. It's imported from China. So the mineral that we're displacing from the American market is almost all foreign, and our market's huge. The plant at Standing Stone, with Susquehanna feeding it, will make about 1,500 metric tons of lithium a year. So if U.S. currently produces about 6,000, the highest estimate anybody has will produce 1,500 right over there. So we'll increase the U.S. production by 25%. That one plant. The plant that we're going to build in Southwest PA, it will be 20 times bigger and will produce 20 times the lithium. Why there? Because there's 20 times the water. Somebody asked me before this week whether we were looking at Texas and New Mexico as well, and we are. Why Texas and New Mexico? Because there's 1,000 times the water there. It's not as concentrated as the water here, but there's a lot more water. The formations there bring 7 to 8 barrels of water out for every unit of oil and gas. Here we're like a portion of a barrel for every unit of hydrocarbons. So those formations produce huge amounts of water that are released when you frack. Most of the water that comes out of formation here, they put down, and it just comes out slowly over time. So that's the reason to build a plant in the southwest U.S., because there they have droughts. Farmers have sold their water to the oil and gas companies instead of growing crops, feeding their cattle. So they're very short on water, and their aquifers are declining. So we build a plant there. We put a plant there at that bigger size we're talking about will make 1 million gallons of water a day for use somewhere. Again, a picture. What's the difference between what we want to do in Susquehanna County and what we've been doing in Bradford County and Lycoming County for the last decade, plus or minus? Eureka Resources takes the produced water. Again, we're focused on produced. We convert it to water, lithium for batteries, pool salt, calcium chloride for de-icing, and what a producer won't take back, we discharge to the hydrologic cycle. This clean, fresh water that meets the standard that we'll talk about. What happens without Eureka? Never an infringement. We generate a new and usable source of fresh water. The lithium recovered is a critical mineral. I talked about lithium earlier. We're the only non-conventional gas or oil water treatment company that does what we do. We effectively remove contaminants from the water. I talked about that. And we also, fresh water is capable of being used for industrial applications, agriculture, habitat restoration, or surface body supplementation. So what are we looking for? We're looking for customers here that want to pay a little bit more to make the environment a whole lot better. That's what we do. Economic impacts. I have 2 slides here. One's the economic impacts, and one's the concerns that we would all have if somebody was going to put a plant in our community. What are the positive economic impacts? Significant job growth. $30 million investment in the plant that we hope to build here. That's just the plant here. At the same time, an extra $30 million invested in our facility at Bradford County. That $30 million convert to calcium chloride dry pearl for de-icing, and to concentrate out the lithium into lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide like I talked about before. All the minerals will be packaged and shipped out of there. There won't be anything shipped out of Standing Stone. Salt to Standing Stone, 1 truckload a day, and about 3 loads of brine a day to go to Standing Stone to convert the lithium into calcium chloride. There'll be 100 construction jobs, and yes, they're temporary. Construction time frame, 18 to 12 months. That includes permitting. As you know, that's why a lot of you here, we did submit for our discharge permit. We're in the process of submitting for our operating permit. Air and waste. There'll be 2 management positions, plant manager and assistant manager, between $90,000 and $150,000 a year job. There'll be 25 plant level jobs. Those are the people that run all the equipment, work in the lab, test the water when it comes in, do all the paperwork. 25 jobs, range between $70,000 and $85,000 a year. Those 27 full-time jobs, we estimate, translated to about 30 additional add-on jobs. That would be drivers that bring the water to us or take it away, people that process the co-product over at our Standing Stone facility, the people that package and move that co-product to market. What other impacts would you be worried about with the plant? Noise, the quality of the water, sound, light, what kind of neighbor is Eureka? Truck traffic, by our estimation, will be reduced. Why will it be reduced? It will be reduced because not all the water that comes to our plant leaves our plant, gets reused again and again and again. So any water that we discharge is water that's gone and out of everybody's line. We could discharge up to 80% of what comes in based on the chemistry and the math. All of the existing wastewater wastewater that's coming to our plant is already being trucked around or through this county. We get about 1,500 barrels a day of wastewater or more from Susquehanna County that drives through the county and come over to Bradford County. Those trucks are already on the road. And when they get done, then they drive back to Susquehanna County to pick up the water. So all we're doing is shortening the drive, putting the plant here instead of having to drive all the way over there. The projected trucks in and out of this facility, this would include the water coming in and the co-product going out is 35 a day. Yes?
I'd like to know what kind of air emissions what kind of air permit you're applying for, what kind of air emissions are on the permit, what is actually being emitted through the process, and you're talking about potential odor, what is on that permit?
We are in the process of putting together a minor air permit, which is a formal term per the DEP.
Hey, Gerald, why don't you stand up so everybody can see you?
We're applying for a minor air permit, and that's a technical term. There's different levels of permit you can go for in Pennsylvania. We will not be a Title V major source. So all of our emissions will be below all major source thresholds, and we're in the process right now of estimating those emissions. Typically from our facilities, we have limits on VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Okay, so we have to make sure all of our processes are designed and operated to minimize VOCs below certain limits in our permits. And we have air permits in all 3 of our existing facilities.
So what's the list besides VOCs? What's on that permit? Besides VOCs, there's got to be other things.
Otherwise, it would just be VOCs and then the primary air pollutants. Okay?
Like what?
So the same pollutants that are in all air permits nationwide. So that would be particulate matter, PM10, PM2.5, different particulates. SOx, sulfur oxides, okay? NOx, which is nitrogen oxides. These are all just the primary pollutants that are in every permit nationwide.
So is that coming out of your plant in the process?
Through engineered emission control systems, yes. That is your answer. So yes, we're generating emissions, but yes, we are complying with, and have always complied with, all the emissions from our plants via engineered emission controls. Okay, so for example, if we have any kind of combustion source, like a boiler or some sort of engine of some kind, we have to comply with all of the individual requirements for controlling the emissions from that engine, for example. Another example, if we have process tanks that have this produced water in them, that have fugitive emissions, we have to have controls in place, and the DEP will make sure we have controls in place to control the emissions coming off of that fluid. So to answer your question, everything will be prescribed by the DEP in our permits, pretty much consistent with what we've been doing since 2008 as a company at our other facilities.
How many turbines will be in the building? How many exhaust emissions will be? How many turbines are in that building?
Well, I can tell you this, when it comes to any compression systems that are involved in our distillers or our crystallizer that are proposed for this facility, those are all electric driven. So there's no combustion, they're not fed by gas, they have an electric motor, not an engine. Okay, so any kind of rotating equipment that we have of significant size is going to be electric driven.
So then what is giving emissions? If that is not giving emissions, what part of your machinery is giving emissions?
That's a good question, because it's not only always machinery and combustion engines, but it's also fugitive emissions from tanks. Like I said, we're having various points in our process where we have storage of water as we're treating it, as well as process treatment tanks. Well, there are emissions from that you have to control.
How many tanks will be on the property?
Well, we're in the process of putting that together, but the best point of reference would be our Standing Stone facility, because this facility is going to be largely comparable to that plant. So that plant has about, I'm going to just throw a guess out there, maybe 20 tanks inside a structure like this, okay, a treatment building, all right? All of which, the emissions from which are captured and we're in compliance with our permit. So a majority of the quantity of tanks will be inside an enclosed building such as this. And then we will, of course, also have some tanks outside that mostly will be covered. Will be fixed tanks that we also have to comply with emission standards.
Are you saying all the emissions are being captured? Are you saying that right now?
To be honest, we're going to capture the emissions that the DEP advises us to capture, just as we do at our other plants, okay? So if there is a tank that has venting or fugitive, emissions coming off it, that the DEP is, requiring us to capture emissions, we will, yes. The answer
So that means some emissions are not captured. Are you saying 100% are being captured? What are you saying?
100% of the emissions will be in compliance. That's my answer.
So compliance is different from captured. How much is being captured? How much is being emitted?
What you need to do is give us 3 minutes to talk a little bit longer about what we do, and then you'll see it. What we're doing, we're capturing all the emissions that are required of any other plant that manufactures anything in America to comply with. So they limit our emission, and we fall within the limits for emissions for any of those individual constituents that you talk about.
And how close is the occupied building home to your facility? What is the closest occupied building? Do you have land right now? What is the closest building? Aren't there homes right there?
There are homes that are outside of the mandated distance away from the treatment facility this time.
What is the mandated distance?
I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't have it. It's all dictated in the waste permitting process, specifically, waste permitting process. So we are in the middle of that process, and we have 3 waste permits for our existing plants, and we're going through that same process where you have to make sure that you comply with the setbacks away from certain kinds of sensitive environmental areas, residential structures, etc. So that's where that's going to be. I don't have those numbers offhand. We can get back to you tomorrow with that confirmation.
And there is a site plan coming up that shows the building, shows where it is, and shows the closest buildings to it.
How many facilities have you already have in town?
3.
We have 3 in total. 2 in Williamsport and 1 in Bradford County, which we call Standing Stone.
And none of those facilities at any time have received any violations. So you have no violations on record for any of the facilities.
We have maybe half a dozen violations in 13 years, and they're minor. If you spill 5 gallons of water on the ground, it's a
There
violation.
were 3 in 2012 that were not resolved.
Okay. There you go ahead.
I have a clarification question that she's also, so regardless of what the EPA or DEP has said, I'm asking you to be more transparent to the community that is going to be dealing with this. So is there any real-time monitoring?
Could I excuse you for a second?
Yes, sir.
I can't quite understand you, so I
Oh,
apologize.
I'll take it off. Then.
Sorry.
COVID, So I'm asking about, for the community's understanding, regardless of the EPA, mainly the community would be most concerned about what they're going to do regardless of our government's standards. So in transparency, is there any real-time monitoring that's continuously monitoring and capturing quantitatively what is actually leaving your facility at all times?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Okay, so, okay.
And it's
So what
open.
way are you doing
And
that?
Where is that data reported to and how often is that data reported? The data that you monitor in real time, who does that go to and how often does that data?
Let me take a stab at this one. There is real-time monitoring and very temporally discrete monitoring in all different permits that we have, air, waste, and water. We're going to cover a lot more detail on the water side here in subsequent slides.
Is it quantitative, though?
Right, it's quantitative, that's correct.
Awesome.
Yes.
And is that available for residents to find without having to file a right to know or a FOIA?
Yes, we'll share it with you.
You'll commit to putting it on whatever time?
Absolutely. You're going to see the water data here in a minute, and we're happy to share the rest.
And we can see those violations also.
Yes, sir. Sure. They're public record. That's right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Noise generation. Our whole operation is inside. The trucks even unload inside. It's got its door in one end and the door out the other. Everything's done inside. There's tanks outside like Gerald talks about. So the noise generated facility will be the trucks coming and going. But when the trucks unload, they're unloading inside an enclosure with sound insulation in it. So minimal change to noise. I'm not going to say none because there's going to be trucks coming and going.
What about if there's no trucks? You're not counting the trucks. What is the noise from the facility that we can hear from the outside of the building?
I'd like you to come over to the plant tomorrow or the next day for contact meeting with my card does. And I invite everybody in the room. Come to Standing Stone. We operate 24/7. We'll take you for a tour. You can listen to the noise. It's exactly the same plant that we're building.
I understand, but you have,
It's exhaust fans that bring air in and take air out.
I understand, you must have decibel meters. What is the, What is the readings on the outside of your
I don't know what the reading is off the top of my head, but we're well below what's required by the building code and by industrial standard. I bet it won't even monitor outside our plant. It won't even read.
To be honest, that is not something that we monitor on an ongoing basis. Decibel readings, for example. Are we open to that? Of course, definitely. That is not something that's required of us, and we didn't take the initiative to do that, honestly, because we don't generate significant amounts of noise in the exterior portions of our operation.
Right.
But we're open to it.
Whatever you consider significant may be different for someone who else lives right next door to what is significant. We have 55 compressor stations in our county. They are operating within buildings. They still make noise above 50 decibels outside of the building. So is yours above or below 50 decibels?
Well,
we have a county ordinance. We have a county ordinance.
Please don't interrupt me, because I'm trying not to interrupt you. We're well below 50 decibels on our property if you stand right next to the plant. The building's closed. Well below. I do know that, because I have a little bit of knowledge of what 50 decibels is. Well below. Yep.
How many trucks per day in your current facilities, and how many could you expect at the facility here?
The facility in Bradford County is about twice this size in water treatment capacity. So about 70 there, 35 here.
Per day total?
Yes.
Will that expand? You're going to hold it at that, or as we get more popular and more, how far, do you have any limits in mind?
It would never be more than about 50 trucks, because I don't have the space to do anymore. We're really focused on collecting the small amount of water that's here and moving most of the operation to Bradford County, like I talked about. So I can't tell you that it will ever expand, but we don't have room to expand very much, and that isn't in our sight. Our expansion vision is for Southwest PA, Texas, New Mexico, Bradford County, Lycoming. We're doing expansion to Lycoming County too. We want to keep the water where it's made.
Safety issues inside the building, you got workers there, so what about their exposure to the things? I know you're keeping it from the outside, they're putting them inside. You got exhaust emissions from the truck, you got VOCs in the building. I mean, what's the safety? Are they going to be wearing hazmat suits in there, or space suits? Because that's the only way you're going to avoid getting VOCs.
Kevin, you want to talk for a minute? This is Kevin Tennant, he's our Chief Operating Officer.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Timmons. I've been with the company since about 2015. Prior to that, I have a master's degree in industrial hygiene, and I spent 5 years at the Occupational Safety and Health Administration as an industrial hygienist, and worked for large mining companies as their head of safety and environmental for those. So now I work for Eureka. We monitor regularly our employees for different constituents that they can come into contact with, including noise, as well as a variety of different air contaminants. We do continuous monitoring of a number of those. We never have had an exceedance of any OSHA permissible exposure limit of any of the monitoring that I have ever been part of here. As far as worker safety goes, they don't wear hazmat suits. They wear a uniform like you would see somebody working at the gas station. They're moving water from one area to the other. They're primarily technical jobs. A lot of these guys are in offices working computers. Our process is very, very automated. Our packaging lines for salt and whatnot that we won't have here, but that we do have there. We have robots in there that handle the bags of salt and automatically package, so there's not ergonomic issues and things like that. We have a very, very, very low injury rate and a very low exposure to safety and health conditions at the facility.
So my question came from this page right here that has radium 226 and 228 on it. Are they being blood tested for the exposure to radiation of any kind?
We don't blood test the employees. We do some radiation testing as a result of our permits that Gerald can talk probably in more detail about. The radium 226 and 228, the levels that are in the plant that we have that go out in a sludge or whatever are at background levels. You know, you dig a basement here, you're gonna have radium. That's just the way that it works. So that's why you test your house for radon before you can sell it, just because of radium in the earth. So anytime you're bringing anything up out of the earth, you're gonna have radium 226 and 228 in it. We monitor radium very closely in our process, primarily from an environmental perspective. but it's not from our monitoring, it's never been a health issue for our employees.
Do you just scan it upon arrival, like when it arrives to your facility, the sludge? Because if it sits for a certain amount of time, it does become more radioactive as it sits. So if it's scanned as it enters even a landfill, what ends up being in the landfill is far more radioactive than upon arrival. So
I think that, Gerald, I mean,
Yeah, that's a very good question, highlighting the TNOR management procedures, and I will say, first of all, that our entire TNOR management program, policies, processes, it's all built within our RAD management plan, and that's a requirement of getting a waste permit from the DEP. I just want to say that up front. And in that plan are details with regards to what you just asked, how individual loads are screened for exposure rate with gamma exposure rate monitors, okay, around every truck that comes in, okay. Number two, regular weekly intermittent scanning of individual process tanks throughout the plant, and this is all of our plants, okay. And quite frankly, all of our competitors do this too. They have to get a permit from the DEP and maintain that permit. And of course, we have our effluent sampling, where we will actually measure radium 226, 228, and other pertinent parameters in any kind of discharge from our facility. So there's multiple points where we are taking not only screening every incoming truck to make sure it's not hot, okay, not over a certain acceptability criteria, but also following that water throughout the plant all the way to the back end, taking radiological readings the whole way. And all of those procedures are going to be spelled out even before we break earth on this property, hopefully, and will be able to be viewed as part of getting your hands on the RAD management plan for this plant. And ahead of that, you're more than welcome to not only visit our plant in Bradford County and see how we do this every hour, every minute of our existence, but you can see our RAD management plan for the existing plants that we have. So it's all.
Do you have the data from your current plant that shows what the levels are every time you measure it?
Yes, we do.
And you'd be willing to share that with?
I'm going to
The greater-
answer that question. I mean, we have the data. It's mandated by the DEP, whether or not we can, how when we put that together.
It's public because the DEP has it. So I don't have to make it hard for you all to say it.
Right.
What's the point?
Is it self-reported, or does an agency come in and actually test it on the spot? Because
No, the agencies won't do any testing when it comes to TNOR and any kind of RAD at all. It's up to us to put the plan, submit that to the DEP, tell them what we're going to do, and then maintain that program, collect that data we say we're going to collect, store that data for subsequent either inspection by a DEP inspector or in any other technical review. So it's up to us, and if we're not doing that, we are in deep trouble, okay? And therefore, we always maintain a schedule of every kind of monitoring that we are required to do, as well as our own process monitoring, okay, throughout the plant. So.
I have one more question about more or less the radioactive aspect.
Sure.
Radioactive aspect, I know, I got this. So when we're talking about the radioactive practice molecules and the dust and this, dangerous part about it is when it gets into our bodies, inhalation or through any mucous membrane. So my question is, are you doing any sort of tube monitoring for what is in the air, so making sure it's not carrying any dust or anything to that effect, to capture and monitor that? It wouldn't be real time, obviously, you have to set it into a lab, just something for your own workers, so they know.
No, we do not do that. No, we do not. That is not part of our current monitoring program. That's a good question, though. I think it's a great question, to be honest with you. But no, at present, we do not conduct that kind of monitoring, nor have we had any elevated values that would suggest that we should do that, I guess is the best way to answer that. In other words, in our routine monitoring, we've never had, to my knowledge, a huge spike for water in a given tank or a given pump or a given section of pipe or whatnot that would indicate that there is a industrial hygiene issue, an exposure issue dictating that kind of monitoring. That's
We know specifically what minerals carry the radium. It's usually the strontium and the bromine, right? And we don't selectively go after those minerals to dry and package and get that stuff airborne or whatnot. That's left in the heavier brine material that goes back to a producer for heavy brine or it goes elsewhere. So we're careful about, you're not gonna get a bunch of radium that's attaching to salt dust that's flying around here, because it's just not there. It doesn't stay with the salt.
Yeah?
Where does the hot load go that doesn't pass your test? When it comes in, it's too hot. Where are they taking that?
Well, frankly, in 13 years, we've never had one. But if it doesn't come to our facility, we have to go, near as I can tell, to an approved site for injection in the ground.
So the
We never-
question, my dad's got 63 years as a first responder and still on patrol. And my question is, or my concern is that talking to DEP, they have a separate division for nuclear power plants. They said that not one truck full of that mixture would make it past that. If you took that same material from a nuclear power plant, like Fruit Island, it'd have to be treated in a totally different way than if it comes up from the ground from drilling a hole for Marcellus Shale. So that's my concern is, but you know, there's a big differential there. Just talking to them, and that's asking them the question.
Right. Let me start by responding by saying this. The differential that you're referring to is significant. That way, the levels of rad in that waste material, it's orders of magnitude higher than what is typically at an oil and gas facility. That's the first response to your comparison there. Okay, number one. Number two, if by chance there is an elevated load that comes into our plant, or we somehow have a tank that's elevated in our treatment of that material, there are specialty companies, okay, and we are not one of them, that are called upon, and in our Rolodex, we've never had to make these calls, okay, or maybe once for, it wasn't even that elevated. Anyways, long story short, there are companies that specifically have expertise in bringing the right equipment onto a site, encapsulating or getting that material ready for transport, and it's taken to a low-level radioactive facility for proper disposal. So if in fact that ever happens, and like I said, I don't believe it's even ever happened in our existence of our company, that there is a whole different set of vendors and contractors and disposal facilities that are specially designed for that. Okay, and basically all of our operations are well below that level per our experience from 13 years of operation. So,
And where do we stop it? We stop it at the door, because we check every truck before we accept it.
My understanding is
We don't
you're
let
getting,
it in.
my understanding is you're getting water that's being put through a sock filter and then put down a hole, then put through a sock filter, put down a hole. I think it's 10 or 15 times they can do it sometimes before it's gonna come to you guys. So obviously it's much elevated from just the original source. Secondly, I noticed sludge in here. So where does the sludge go? Because the solid waste worries me quite a bit, and where they're putting it. So where does your solid waste and sludge go to after you guys are done with it?
We have a slide coming up on that. I'm going to let you answer that question about sludge, because you have the words for the landfill and how we can
for an hour.
Well, I mean, we'll skip ahead and then I'll just skip back.
All right, so this slide, it's about 5 or 6 slides past where we were, kind of summarizes the process, the solid residual material that we generate inevitably from our process. And it's generated from the physical chemical pre-treatment of the brine shortly after it comes into our plant, okay? So we basically put that water to prepare it for crystallization and recovery of things like sodium chloride to ensure that that's a safe product that we're recovering. We put it through some pre-treatment to get some impurities out of the way, okay, to put it simply. So we are changing the pH, we're adding coagulants, we're dropping down and collecting solids that qualify as non-haz solids, okay, in every step of the word, in every sense of the definition of that word. And what I mean technically by that is, if we have any aspiration of disposing of that non-haz material at any landfill in any radius of our facilities, okay, we have to prove to the DEP on a quarterly basis, as well as the landfills that we intend to take our material to, that our material continues to comply with non-haz limits. Okay, so we have to do things like a TCLP analysis on a quarterly basis, which basically is an evaluation of solids, how they're going to leach, the quality of the material leaching out of that. It's a standard analysis. Our landfills put us through the ringer because the DEP puts the landfills through a ringer, so that comes downhill to us. So anyways, this slide summarizes the quantities that we generate on a given basis at our existing facilities. So at our Williamsport plant, which is the plant that came online in 2008, our first plant, we generate only about 70 to 90 tons per month of this non-haz dewatered sludge cake. Okay, that's fit for disposal in the region and landfills in our region here in Pennsylvania in a non-haz landfill, which is defined as a RCRA D landfill. That's just the designation of it. At our standing stone plant, because we have a more robust pre-treatment process to get ready for salt production and recovery, okay, downstream of that point in the plant, we generate a bit more sludge because we're dropping out more impurities that would complicate sodium chloride crystallization downstream. So we have a bit more sludge, and those are our estimated quantities right there. Okay, all of which is also non-haz. Same chemistry, same quality of sludge that allows us to dispose of that material in regional landfills, not having to take it to Utah, transloading, rail, all that. We do not have to do that relative to how we treat this material. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So there are 12 or 15, I'm not sure the exact number in there, of the landfills in Pennsylvania that do take radioactive frac waste. And the most easy one to go home and Google is the Bell Vernon landfill. And the Bell Vernon landfill takes a significant amount of gas and oil, frac waste, pipeline waste, drilling waste, what drill cuttings, fill in the blank of it. The Bell Vernon landfill has a leachate issue that now is leaching radioactive materials into Monongahela River, which is a drinking source for most of southwestern Pennsylvania. So these non-haz waste, like saying non-haz means there's a loophole that allows this waste not to be classified as hazardous, and that's a federal loophole. So it's misleading, and I realize that it's quote unquote legal, and you're following the process, and I understand that, but I just think I didn't know that 6 months ago, and I'm a state senator, so I just want everyone to know that that is a loophole that now allows radioactive waste to leach from landfills that are not correctly managed into your drinking water. And there's no mandate to test that drinking water for radioactivity. And that's a failure on the state government, that's not their fault. But I do say that it's corporate responsibility to ensure that your products and your actions don't do the same thing.
So where we see our responsibility, and I hear you loud and clear, those are concerns that have to be absorbed and listened to. So I'm definitely not arguing with that. I will say it's our corporate responsibility to confirm and make sure that our process is consistent and we're generating waste and sludge residuals, which is our only solid material that we generate as a waste product from our process, to make sure we don't have excursions and we don't have even one load that can't be disposed of safely per existing regulation. So that is our commitment. Okay, that's the thing we focus on every day. And if we take the finger off that trigger and not pay attention to that, then that's where there will be a breakdown. But that is our ethos. That is what we focus on when it comes to making sure we generate compliant material. Okay, that is what we focus on every day. So that's where we put our efforts. Everything above and beyond that, I am not minimizing the importance of that by any means. It's just beyond the scope and boundary of our participation in this industry. Okay, so we just make sure we do our job correctly, keep our residuals as low as possible with regards to exposure rate, activity levels, as well as all the other things, TCLP metals, all the other constituents. Our job is to make sure our process is consistent, and that is what we focus on.
I just wanted to be honest about that, because saying non-hazard implies it's harmless, and it's not. And also the waste and sludge from these storage tanks and landfills is over 300 times the radioactive measurement of nuclear waste, if it sits long enough.
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if I agree with that, as it pertains to our facilities and the way that we manage this material.
2015 T1 study, and if I should have printed a copy for everyone instead of being like 300 pages, but certainly worth a read.
One of the keys, and I talked about at the beginning of our presentation, we don't hold waste, we don't send it around, we don't let waste sit in our tanks and concentrate. We try to avoid and minimize the production of any waste all the time. That's part of what we packed into our process. It wasn't just how do I get minerals out, how do I do it specifically and not generate concentrated waste stream like you're talking about. We spend a lot of time on that, and that's part of the path protection. That's part of the process that we do. We do have producers who do exactly what you say and end up with that exact same problem in their tanks, and we can't take their waste because we check every letter, and we don't.
And I hope to go on the tour to see the process of how this reused wastewater over and over again, because it is bringing up radioactive material every time it's used to frack a well, and then recycle, then it eventually does come to you. So because it hasn't sat long enough, you know, to generate further radioactivity, that's good that it gets to you timely, but it is bringing more up at a saturated concentration because it's being reused.
I would say that that's partially correct, but the other response to that would be is that, first of all, our position, you know, what we bring to the industry is to hopefully sever that hopscotching and constant reuse of very extremely contaminated material. Material can be brought to our facility, put through a robust process, and we are recovering 4 freshwater barrels for every 5 coming in the door, number one. Number two, those statements are true to some extent, but really where the rubber meets the road is the data behind that, okay? If a given truck comes in the front door and it's below an acceptability threshold, by the way, that's significantly lower than the definition of even low-level nuclear waste. That's way higher than anything that we see come to our door, number one, and any material within our plant, okay? The low-level radioactive waste, which is a technical term, is way higher, mathematically, when you look at the numerics of the thing. So what I'm trying to get at here is, at every point in our process, we are generating real data, confirming that this is treatable material, we can treat it safely, and that the residuals that we generate, our phys chem sludge, can be disposed of at non-hazardous landfills. And I use that term because that's actually a technical term too.
I understand. I just wanted to be known that non-hazardous is not harmful. So
I use non-hazardous.
It's a rule provided by the federal government, so that not the average person would know that.
Sure. I use the term non-haz not as a buzzword. It's actually a technical term. If you call, for example, waste management landfill, I'm just using an example.
I understand the technical term. I just want them
Thank
to
you.
know the actual operational definition does not mean that you could roll in it and your kids could, you know, play with it.
That is for sure. That is, of course, for sure.
I'm going to take a second. I'll take a lot more questions, but I do want to take a second, try to get through the presentation, and then we can open up for questions again if that's okay, because I think it might be a little better order, and then what we don't cover, you all are certainly welcome to ask us about. Is that okay with everybody? You got to go back a little bit. I think we beat the tar out of that. This is a site plan of the proposed facility. Just down the road on Route 29.
Is that the old Cavanaugh
Yes.
building?
You're calling it Cavanaugh?
Yeah.
Yes. Is it? Okay. So Route 29 is on the right. There's an existing waste treatment facility right there where it says Eureka on the left. That's where the Hibbard have a compact habit wastewater treatment, I should say, recycle facility right there. So this is right next to it, right next door. And what's in black there, for folks who are already to the plant, the picture of the plant, with the exception of one tank and one small building, that's an absolute duplicate of what we built in Bradford County. So when you come to Bradford County for a visit, you'll see exactly what we're going to do here if we can get this plant going.
Excuse me, could you just point out where the point of discharge would be in that picture?
Can you see the road that comes from 29 over to the plant? See the purple road?
Yep.
Sorry, the picture's so small.
Okay.
It'll discharge just on the upper side of that purple road, and there approximately between the two green bars that are vertical that are just basically a vegetative barrier. We're going to put some evergreen trees and whatever around, because I talked about noise and sight, just to make the plant look pretty. But there's a run that runs from there diagonally to the corner of the property in the lower right-hand corner and under 29 and on over to Burdick Creek. The Williamsport plant does not make fresh water, I told you that before. We distill water there. We discharge the distilled water to the municipal sewage treatment plant where they treat the VOCs and the VOD, the stuff the distillation doesn't take out. We have the only reason that's on there is we have a robust sampling program that we started there, which is exactly what we still do at Standing Stone. So we have sampling within the plant at every system. We also have sampling of the tanks of water that we discharge before we turn on the discharge valve, so we know what we're discharging. And then right where those tanks discharge, there's a flow meter and there's a sample that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That takes a composite sample. That means for every 1,000 gallons of water that runs out of there, it takes the same size sample. It puts it in a jug. Every day we test that jug. So that's confirmation that what we discharge is what we said we discharge. DEP can come in at any time and take a sample out of that jug, and we don't know that they're coming. So they do spot checks all the time, but we test the water every single day. So that's how we're sure that what we put in the stream is what we say we put in the stream. The Standing Stone, by the way, that's how we prove to the WSA, Williamsport Sanitary Authority, we give them is exactly what we say it's given them. So we duplicated that process for our plan in Standing Stone Township. So if somebody wants to see the data about the water we discharge, it's there. We don't have to produce all that and give it to DEP either, but we do have mandated reporting that we need to do, which Gerald can talk about, and we're glad to show you. But we have daily data throughout the plant and at that piece of sampling equipment. Both plants have extensive process sampling. I just talked about that. Oversight above and beyond what's required by the permits. DEP requires what on the water sampling before we get it over here like that.
For Standing Stone?
Yeah.
For Standing Stone, we have what's called a direct discharge permit, which is different than our Williamsport plant in that we are directly discharging to a surface water. So the Susquehanna River in that case, okay? And we've been doing so since the summer of 2014. So the material that comes in our plant, we put it through our process, pre-treatment, distillation, crystallization, and then post-treatment of that distillate before it reaches the river, and then it goes to the river. So that's the summary of that process. And then at the tail end of that process, of the many requirements in a direct discharge permit, arguably the most important, the DEP requires you to put a sampler in place, a flow-weighted sampler, where you are continually sampling that discharge stream and analyzing those samples by a third-party certified lab every month, and have to submit what's called a discharge monitoring report, a DMR report, which has all the results of those third-party analyses by a third-party lab to confirm that you're complying with your discharge limits. So that's the process. Yes?
How does the discharge, you've used the figure that this will be about half the size treatment-wise. How does the receiving water body compare to the Susquehanna River?
Oh, in this case?
Yeah.
Significantly smaller. So where the rubber meets the road there, the limits for our plant are going to be more stringent than our Bradford County plant. Okay? That's how that's going to reflect. Okay, so significantly. We know that. We know that even if we go to a larger stream that's further off the site of our plant, those would still be small, way smaller than the Susquehanna.
So do you have temperature data as it comes, like before it goes?
Yeah, we have to monitor temperature as part of our discharge. That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
And none of your violations previously had anything to do with this stuff? You're monitoring?
To be honest with you, at our Standing Stone plant, we may have had, since 2014, we might have had, and I don't know the exact number, 2 or 3 months where our ammonia level was slightly over the limit, okay, in that effluent, ammonia, okay? That was an operational upset that we immediately corrected, and since then have not had an issue. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is we try to reach perfection as much as possible, as close to 100% as we can. It is possible that, yeah, there are excursions, but we minimize them. I mean, I'll have the number, but less than 1% of all samples that that's literally what it would come out to, are out of compliance. So that is a random outlier, not common by any means. Okay, but
And how quickly could you catch that?
well, you catch it immediately. You catch it immediately with your,
You wouldn't have had a significant discharge.
that's correct, that's correct.
But you caught it. in
That's a
early-
great way to put that, that's exactly right too, yes, that's correct. Yeah,
They still take fresh water from streams to fracking. Why don't they use your water instead of having it destroyed in the stream?
They will. They will, especially when we're here because it's close enough. They won't truck it back from Bradford County to Susquehanna County. The other issue that there is with the fresh water, the way the regulation's written, our water is characterized as de-wasted by DEP, which means the producer can take it back and put it in its fresh water and pound it. On the way from our plant to the fresh water impoundment though, they have to still call it residual waste, placard the truck as residual waste. And if there's an accident with the truck, then it has to be responded to like it's a residual waste. Why did DEP do that? When they wrote that standard, we have no idea. We complained about it in 2012.
the last permit revision, yeah.
Because it's a disincentive for producers to take fresh water back. Well, if I have an accident in that truck, it's the same thing. But we are hearing from customers here, they absolutely will take a lot of water from this plant because it's in the right place. This business is a lot about logistics, having the treatment and the water where they want it. It's very important. Their biggest cost isn't what we do, it's moving the water around the truck. So we're minimizing that for them by trying to get here. But our customers are telling us, yeah, we're going to take a lot of water back, but they won't take it all.
Why not?
And we can't shut down. Well, what happens in January when trucks aren't on the road for 3 days? And we're still getting water in and we still need to treat water. They won't take it back. Sometimes the water's closer. I don't want to say anything bad about our customers, but they do what they do. So we have to be ready for the worst when we build a plant, which is they're going to bring me water and they're not going to want any back for a month or two. That's what we have to be ready for if we're going to offer business to them.
Yeah.
Do you know what the percentage of the flow, where it's being discharged at? What's the percentage of the effluent compared to what the annual average drainage is for that area?
Good question, I don't have those numbers of,
Is that monitored by DEP?
What's that?
Is that regulated by DEP?
Our flow rate will be regulated, our discharge, yes, for sure.
Do they use the catchment area measurement? Do they use that to come up with how much effluent you can actually discharge?
Extremely good question, and to be honest, that's all wrapped up in their modeling effort. I happen to know how they do this, okay? They have their own receiving water body modeling program that they utilize that integrates the quality of our effluent that we're proposing, the quantity of the flow rate, and then they run a model to simulate our contribution of our discharge into receiving stream X, Y, Z, name it. Susquehanna, this unnamed tributary, Burdick, whatever we choose, they run that. The model spits out effluent limits that integrate things like you just said. The flow rate of that receiving stream, is it thousands of gallons a minute, or is it a small stream? And the end result is that model generates effluent limits based on all of that data, including what you referenced.
So it's just really surprising that you would choose to put it up here because it's such a small catchment area. Now, I'm not doubting Eureka's ability to work the process. My concern is that even with the minor amounts of regulated effluent, pollutants within that effluent, you're talking about concentrated flow at that point if it's half of the flow rate in that catchment.
I might just add to that if you don't mind. When we've looked at projects in the Permian Basin, just as an example, one of the projects I did is I compared municipal water quality data, which is what the cities were feeding to their residents in municipal data. The water coming out of our plant in Bradford County was cleaner than the water that was being fed to a lot of those municipalities.
Well,
So the only reason I say that is that
this water quality.
well, I'm talking about the Permian, right? I'm not talking about here. I'm just saying the water quality of the water coming out of the pipe, that one right there,
Yep.
at the Eureka plant. I looked at like 6 cities in Texas and New Mexico to compare what does the residential water look like in comparison to that. This water was at least as clean, if not cleaner, than the water that was being sent to those particular residents. So, some of the concern that we've actually had there was your water's too clean to go into a surface water body. But in this case, there's enough flow. There's not a lot of flow down there, right? So it's a legitimate question, it's a legitimate point. Also I'm trying to stress is the water is really clean. It's really clean water coming out of that.
Yeah, along the same lines of that though, living right here, that creek is dry half the year. It's not even really a creek. It's a discharge out of the pond, it's right next to your driveway. I have no doubts what you do, I've been together for 10 years. I know what you do, you guys do great. My concern is where you're locating the property. Because that creek runs mostly dry, most of the year, runs right across the road and down through beef cow pasture with 50 beef cows in it. That's all the trees out there. Just a concern, that's all.
Well, we understand that. That's how confident we are about cleaning the water. There's just nothing wrong with the water.
What about the erosion?
I'm sorry?
What about any chance of erosion or changing the property and stuff, you know?
That's a valid question.
Biological property.
This is a picture of our discharge, video rather, of our discharge. That's bigger than the discharge stream that's going to come out of this plant because this is not a plant that's making twice as much water. I only took this so people can start to visualize what's 50 gallons a minute look like. Okay, that was 70 gallons a minute or 80 coming out of that pipe.
Into the Susquehanna.
Into the Susquehanna. But I did that because that very much is, let's see if I can. That very much is what the discharge into that little run will look like. So yeah, there'll be water running in it. By the way, if producers aren't taking it all back, there'll be that much water running in it, or a little bit less than that. But if they are, there won't be anything running in it. So it'll be wet more often than it is now.
Your plan is, they frack from April to November, your plan is for all the water to go back into the hole.
Right.
You're gonna discharge November to.
We're going to discharge sporadically when they can't take the water back, which is
Mostly the winter.
most of the winter months.
Look, to tie into that question and the previous one, I think it's important to point out, the optimal case would be, if the producers take back every drop of this fresh water that we're making, that would be great. We happen to live in a rainforest here in Pennsylvania, so water is everywhere, right? And that's not, and I'm kind of overstepping the border of what Eureka serves as a purpose. That would be great. We're the only ones making fresh water, de-wasted water from this material in the state. The only ones doing it. And arguably the only ones doing it in the whole United States, okay, for this type of material. We just need to make sure that we have an extremely robust and tested and proven process for when there is not a demand for that. If producer X, company X is going down the road and sucking it out of the river, which is not a decision we're involved with at all. But I can tell you this, our best case scenario is that every drop is taken back and that replaces water that's taken from a river. That'd be great. And that's just my personal opinion, and arguably the opinion of all of us. Because we're built to make that water. We're built to make water that's no longer a residual waste. They could put it in a freshwater impoundment, and that's X amount of gallons that did not come out of the stream. That'd be fantastic, you know, absolutely.
What about the biological aspect? Has there been any tax sites, since he said it was like a stream that is going to be dry and you're putting in this other water source, not natural, not the biological? How's it going to affect the ecology? Have there been impacts?
He's going to talk to that in a second. I'm not trying to rush anybody.
No, it's just-
I'm trying to get the information before you ask me the question. So let me do 2 slides here Gerald's going to cover, and he's going to talk a lot more about the water. He'll cover the biological, VOCs. I hope cover that stuff. And again, that's the integral part. That's that second patent I said we had. That's what we worked so long and hard to figure out is how do we really make the water safe? Okay.
You've heard a few different phrases. Fresh water, de-wasting, effluent, sampling, and all these apply to our existing facilities, right? What this table highlights and provides some detail on are some of the numeric reality, the data behind our operations, and they compare to our permit limits, which is what's handed down to us by the DEP and our permits, but above and beyond that. You've heard us mention drinking water, for example. We don't make water to be consumed right from our plant, okay? The reason why we bring that into this discussion is the effluent that we make is so devoid of contamination and impurities that it happens to meet drinking water standards. That's how much treatment we provide for this water. That's the reason why we bring up the term drinking water. So on this table, on the left, you see a list of parameters, And these happen to be parameters, a sampling of them, that are in our discharge permit in our existing facility in Standing Stone Township in Bradford County, all right? Which is where we have this full level of treatment. So you see things like biological oxygen demand. These are typical permit parameters that the regulators will have you monitor and comply with, all right? Total suspended solids, total dissolved solids, so that's like all the salts and whatnot. Ammonia, barium, chloride, this is sampling, all right, down the left-hand side. The first, the orange column there, those are the limits in our Standing Stone permit for those parameters, okay? So this is what the DEP says you need to comply with, at a minimum, and discharge this water to a receiving stream. We could stop right there. That could be our stopping point right there as a company. Comply with our permits, we're done. But we didn't. We did not stop there. The blue column reflects the actual long-term concentrations in our effluent of those select parameters. All right? And what I would like to have you focus on is how significantly lower, well below what the DEP is setting as permit limits, our effluent is for these parameters. Right? That's the big message of that blue column. A majority of what we measure in our effluent at Standing Stone is not even detectable by analytical methodology. That's how low it is. We get non-detect, below the capability of that instrument in the lab to actually analyze for that parameter. All right. So again, that's 7 years, every month of data for 7 years. That's what that average is in the blue column. All right. And again, just for comparison purposes, for these select example parameters to examine, what we did was we summarized what the actual federal drinking water standard, which is not a standard we need to comply with, all right? This just reflects, we're even lower than if you took a cup of that water and drank it, if the EPA drinking water standards are part of that discussion. So that's just for a comparison purpose to illustrate how far we take our level of treatment of our process. Yes?
I was wondering, since it's so low, why not consider selling bottled water to the public, since we always need bottled water? That could be another side business for you, since it's so low and so pure. Why not sell it?
To be honest with you, we see our role as returning water to the hydrologic cycle being most important, number one. Number two, we are not targeting our water for direct consumption. And we don't have all of the polishing level treatment processes in place to target specifically drinking water, number two rather. And number three, there isn't a demand in the area for us to assess.
There are people in Billings that haven't had drinking water in 11 years. That's insulting to people there. I really have to.
Sure.
There's a tremendous demand.
Let me revise my statement and say this, that the regulations that we comply with on a day-to-day basis, we are not focused on any drinking water at present, okay? So that's the answer. Yeah.
That was the answer. We don't mean that. We do not mean to stand here and insult anybody about issues we had in the past.
I know, but you're saying that it's compliant with drinking water standards, so if you're dumping it, discharging it into the stream that's in someone's backyard that doesn't have drinking water, and you're implying that they can go get a nice cup of water out of the stream that you're discharging because you're saying the levels are the same. It's misleading.
So, gentlemen, on your own documentation, it says returning water to its natural state. Is the water that flows out of the well of my sixth-generation property in Silver Lake Township, is that distilled and reverse osmosis? No, it's not. So that's an actually a non-factual statement in your documentation. That is not natural occurring water. Natural flowing water is full of minerals and other bountiful things that are used in our body. You've returned it to a sterilized state, which I would be concerned about what that does in a trout stream or anybody else's.
If we were going to.
So secondly, I'm sure you're aware you're standing in the middle of what's called a 9 square mile no drill area for the last 11 years. You can't drill a well here, so you know all this is coming from outside the area, number one. Number two, Cabot has bought filtration systems for many people here. You can see them. They're black and white buildings sitting next to their houses. Drive down any road, you'll see them here, here, and here. For some reason, they weren't able to take care of it. Obviously, your process is much more robust, so I would agree by looking at your documentation. The problem is, would you, on the tour, go to the effluent, pour a nice thirsty 2-ouncer and drink it? And would you offer that to your own children? Because you're asking people here to accept that to be clean and safe water going through their backyard.
Yes, I would, but you're all missing the point. Okay, the point is, if we were going to sell drinking water, there'd be a whole nother list of standards we'd have to meet, number one, okay?
So did you just say you would drink it out?
Sure, I'll do it tomorrow if somebody's there, I've done it before, okay?
Okay.
But that's not the point, okay? The point is, it's a whole other bunch of standards, so just pretend you're me. And I don't mean to make this silly, okay? And I'm going to sell bottled water that came from a gas well. I'm having a rough time tonight convincing you all that it's okay to discharge it to a stream. And I'm going to sell it in a bottle. Who's going to market that? Okay? It doesn't make any sense because there's lots of other fabulous uses for the water that we pointed out tonight. Okay? Going back into a river, watering grasslands, feeding cattle. Okay? It does get demineralized the minute it hits that stone at the outfall, by the way. That's the end of the problem on the mineralization. Okay? Not to mention the tanks that it sits in the plant, which when you all come, and you're all invited, you'll be able to see.
Can we agree that number 2 drinking water can't be drank?
What's that?
Can we agree that number 2 drinking water is not drinkable?
I can't say that, actually. I can't say that.
I think what's happening is here, we meant to have this whole drinking water discussion as a comparison, not to, how do I put this, to assert that our water, and we're targeting using it for direct consumption or whatnot. So I think that's kind of what's happening is we wanted to compare the robustness of our treatment level.
Well, don't use that term. Don't say drinking water number 2. It's not drinking water.
If I was a 5-year-old reading this, gentlemen, it looks like pure water, safe water, natural water. It's far from that. I mean, this is not natural water even after you clean it.
No, I respectfully disagree that it's not safe water. I completely respectfully disagree that it's not fresh safe water.
What standard not for human consumption will like?
I disagree with that. You're trying to put words in our mouth.
No, that's a liability issue for you guys if somebody did.
He's basically saying that the water you're saying is like what you're producing is not what we as humans can consume, and that we have no studies to show that sterilized water or what it'll do to our bodies or street. He's just saying it's not drinkable because it's not natural.
We're only referencing that standard because that's the name of the standard.
I understand where you're at.
Okay, it's called the Federal Drinking Water Standard. Okay, and we didn't say anywhere in the slides that we're marketing the drinking water market.
I just want to make one statement, please, that instead of putting it in the stream and wasting the water, we have dozens of families in Dimock that need water. Can you pipe it from the plant and bring it to the families, and they can use the water since it's pure? Can you spend whatever it is, $6 million, make a pipeline to the families in Dimock? Because this is ground zero for water contamination in the process. Instead of the stream, give us the water.
Man, this is, in my opinion, the best answer I can come up with for your statement and your rebuttal there, and that is, we are more than willing to walk down the road and explore that as an option. The regulatory requirements, the programs that the DEP has in place and other regulators have in place right now are not focused on that. Does that mean Eureka is not willing to look into that? I would speak for my colleagues and say, I think we would look into that. You know, that's not something that we market, that we have within our capability or focusing on at all. But being a good neighbor, being cognizant of what the challenges are in this region, both historically and at present, of course we would look into that. We would definitely partner, and I would be personally the technical lead of that effort, okay? We would look into that. Right now, the regulations and all the approvals and all the technology requirements, it's not focused to allow that right now, as simple as we're talking about it. But could we walk down that road together? Sure. Yes, definitely. It's just not set up right now, and it's out of our hands, quite frankly. And the only reason why we're even talking about this is we are the only entity in the entire United States that's making this kind of water from stuff that is, you know, has red, heavy metals, organics, and looks like a pot of coffee coming in the front door. All right. Out the back end, you could see down to a 12-foot depth on our storage tank. That's how, and you saw it in the video. So that, without question, is something we would entertain, participate in, But if there was a DEP person in this room right now, they would be sweating, because that is not anything that they're rolling out that we are aware of, but we're listening. We're here, we're listening, definitely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
From a resident, because you're not getting to hear from residents of Dimock Township, the lobbyists in the back are taking over, but why in the middle of town?
What's that?
Why in the middle of town? Because your standing stone facility is kind of set out, you have very few neighbors over there. Why, a lot of us, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but my concern as a Dimock Township resident for my whole life is, it's right in the middle of town. We have one eyesore in the middle of there now, why do we need a second?
Ours isn't an eyesore. Go down.
What's that?
Ours isn't an eyesore.
I have to be,
I can see it from my back.
let me put it through this way, I have to be careful, okay, what I say, not because I'm scared of telling you all something, but I think in 4 or 5 years, well, if we can get this built, we'll be the only one left here. That's the most honest answer I can give you, okay? So we went to the center where our customers said they wanted us to go, that's most convenient, and I think we'll put the rest of them out of business.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, I'm being as honest with the answer as I can, that's why.
The other half, another part of that answer is, this is like the third site in this area where we want it to be established that we've looked at, and because of some conflicts with some of the permit requirements, where the truck traffic was an issue up the road that it isn't up, here. This is not the first site that we evaluated. This is like the third site in this area. This area is important because that's where our customers are. And this doesn't exist unless you're close to the activity. That's the reality. That's the first answer. The second answer, we looked at 2 or 3 other sites before we got to this site. So we have tried to minimize maximize setback from residents and whatnot by looking at other prospective sites, and there were negatives to those sites that we didn't want, but we respected. Okay.
What you say about putting them out of business, that means more trucks coming to your facility. If that's included with the 35 you already gave us, that's enough.
Yes.
Even if we doubled our plant to, I think we're going to treat 2,500 barrels a day. A truck on average holds about 115 barrels. So even if we double it to 5,000, you're only talking 2 trucks an hour, because we're open 24 hours a day.
That would be more trucks than I put on here.
But
I'm not
the
building
first
a
plant, we're only going to do 2,500, so it's like 1 truck an hour.
Is there a study that has to be done first about traffic increase?
Yes. And we'll have to kind of answer to the bell is when we get and apply for and hopefully obtain approval from the Susquehanna Development Authority, which integrates not only kind of the permit applications, the waste, the water that the air that we're going from the DEP, but also local code restrictions, such as truck traffic, light pollution, noise. That's where that's really going to hit the fan, is making, and we're going to be evaluated, okay, in that process.
You had a question, yeah?
What are you gonna do about the truck traffic coming in off 29? Truck traffic coming off 29?
Off 29?
Yeah.
We're basically building a widened entrance to the plant, so they basically turn right off. There's a way, we have a permit, we already submitted for permit, so there's a big improvement to the access
There's a whole bunch of houses around
to
there.
that property.
There's a whole bunch of houses there where you're gonna have truck traffic.
As I mentioned earlier, there won't be any more truck traffic on Route 29 because it's already there. They're going to turn into our place.
29, you're gonna have a lot of trucks.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of truck traffic right there where that yellow line is right now. So instead of pulling in where the bottom yellow line is, they're going to pull in to see us.
I think another important point to make here is that just take a look at the paved area that's part of our proposed footprint of our plant. That paved area will have capacity to store and idle trucks while they're waiting to discharge the material into our process. So these trucks won't be lined up on 29. We are going to have a ring road, not only the access road from 29, having its own kind of waiting capacity, if you will, but also that road of paved area outlined by that pink line there. That's essentially going to allow for, and we haven't counted this before this meeting, but similar to our standing stone plant, there are at any time, 5 to 6, 7 trucks on there that are not on the 29 or in standing stone case, Route 6. So there won't be trucks on the road. That will never happen, ever. And one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, is there's going to be capacity interior to the plant. Okay, that all of that activity is going to be contained in that active area there.
But the trucks have to get off 29 to get.
Agreed. And I think the only rebuttal we can make to that, there's two. One is the one that Mr. Erdl made, and that is, we're not adding new trucks, we're just the trucks that were going somewhere else that are coming to our
But
facility.
they're all gonna be there.
They're here already. We're just bringing them to what we believe to be a more robust facility that's better at handling this material than anything, anywhere. All right, number two, the design of that driveway, we had to apply to PennDOT and apply for what's called a highway occupancy permit. And we basically have that permit, we just haven't given our construction bond yet, that's the last step. But we had probably 7 or 8 or 9 rebuttals back and forth, meticulously commenting on our design for our driveway entrance to make sure it met all DOT requirements. We probably had 6, 7, 8 revisions back and forth with DOT to make sure that was correct. So that's the other. So we're doing everything we can to not only keep vehicles off of 29, but hopefully have that be the best that we could possibly accomplish. Best driveway design to minimize impacts, sightline issues, etc. So that's.
That area is the wetland, so are you going to fill in that wetland for your road?
We are not. We
So
are.
you're going to drive paved?
There are areas, first of all, we are not going to impact a single micro acre of wetland. We know where the wetlands are, we did a wetland delineation on both parcels, and we have our facility where it is on this proposed layout, because there are no identifiable wetlands in that area. Okay, that's why it's there and not, say, closer to 29, for example, where there are wetlands, and there is that stream that we're proposing to discharge into, okay? So to answer your question, we are paying the utmost respect to wetlands, and our approach is to not impact anything and build around it. No disturbance. That's our objective. Yes, sir.
My name is Tom Site.
Tom.
I have been a resident of Dimock for 74 years. I am concerned about the environmental impact, and I appreciate all of you people voicing your concern
And we appreciate it as well.
about the environment. And I'm sure you do too. I just want to interject something here because I think it's an appropriate time to do it. To the people, the environmentalists that are concerned with Dimock, I want you to take a minute to go and visit the plant if you haven't done so already. Secondly, on the way to the plant, if you are going west from Dimock, I want you to stop and take a minute to look at the illegal dumping which is going on just off the road. I'm sorry, I just had to focus.
No problem.
If you're truly concerned about the environment, please go and take a look at that.
Where is
If
it?
you're worried about water contamination, please take a look at that. They're not involved in the petrochemical business or anything else, but if you're truly concerned, please go and check it out. Thank you.
Yeah, we will, thank you.
We're almost through, so I'm going to do a couple more slides. Sorry.
Okay, so in the category of ways that Eureka has gone above and beyond just our discharge permit, we could have stopped there and said, okay, we'll meet these requirements easily, but we did not stop there. We went after the de-wasting certification from the DEP, and that's in the waste permit. And we are the only one that demonstrated that our water can be de-wasted in the eyes of the DEP. Okay, we did that. On top of that, we chose to voluntarily participate in an industry trade group, okay, called the Center for Responsible Shale Development. This group, which, to be honest, doesn't have many legs at present, per our understanding, okay? At the time, it was comprised of some producers themselves, stakeholders, NGOs, non-governmental agencies, concerned citizens, even religious representation, I believe some political representation as well at the time. And the whole ethos of that organization was to put together standards that are above and beyond what's required in regulations. So we thought that was good alignment at the time for what we do, because that's how we view ourselves. We were, at the time, with the CRSD, and we helped develop a water quality standard based on our level of treatment, which is above and beyond any regulatory requirement. So we chose to go through a process with this organization, do way more above and beyond sampling for way more parameters voluntarily, which then fed into that organization's development of a more robust industry standard within the industry, the oil and gas industry. So it's nothing more than, for this slide is not to get into hairy detail, which we can get into it in any other time you want to discuss. This is just to show you we not only welcome these scenarios, we run towards them. We make effluent, we're proud of what we do, and we run towards opportunities that show that we're way above and beyond anything that could be defined as an industry standard, a regulatory standard, etc. So that's the point of that slide. Okay, so one phrase we've heard kind of bantered around here in the last hour and a half is this de-wasting concept. Okay, that actually is a formal technical term handed down by the DEP in the waste permit for our kinds of facilities. They're called WMGR 123, which is the acronym, the identifier of the permit that we have for the waste side. And in the revision, I think it was in 2010, somewhere in there, right? The DEP added an appendix to the permit, this general waste permit, of which we're going to have to get for this plan, obviously. In that appendix, the DEP put a table, and that's the table right there, where they listed parameters for treated effluent from any 123 facility, any waste facility that we compete with, okay? And basically said to the industry, if you can meet these standards, you will transform the definition of that liquid material from residual waste to fresh water, de-wasting. And that's important because material that leaves a process that can do that, we are the only one in the state that has met this requirement, even now. That was 2010, we're in obviously 11 years later, nobody else has done it yet, all right? If you can meet these standards, if the water coming out of your plant can meet those extremely low levels, then that water can be taken back, not even put into a residual waste impoundment that can have spills and have contamination events, etc. It can be put into a freshwater impoundment, essentially equivalent to water taken out of a river and put into a storage unit that doesn't require robust design. That's how much the level of quality that we need in our effort. We have been the only one to do this, and we still are the only one. 11 years after its promulgation. So to get this, I won't dive into too much detail, we had to go through, basically if you look at the 123 permit, and we can share ours, it's all publicly available, there are 2/3 of a sheet of one of the pages that go through this extremely detailed sampling and analytical characterization that you have to go through to demonstrate that you can do this. And we're the only one that did it. And we're the only one that can maintain this certification. So this not only demonstrates the robustness of our treatment process, but this opens up more flexibility for our customers, the producers, right? They can take our water back, encourage them to bring water to a robust facility like this, and not take it to a plant that's just putting it through a filter sock or doing basic fizz kind of treatment, and there's still contaminated residual waste coming out the back end. You bring it to a Eureka facility, we are recovering 4 barrels out of every 5 coming in as fresh water, meeting this standard, okay? Not only the discharge standard, but this standard, and hopefully encouraging producers to not take water from a river, not take from groundwater, fresh water that's very valuable in this region for a multitude of reasons, and take that back and use that as fresh water. Our vision is that's the model, not facilities that provide quote-unquote partial level treatment that still have liquid residual waste being generated and stored in significant quantities at those facilities. That's not our model at all.
Gerald, I want to just mention the wet testing, just briefly. You got
Good
a
point.
question earlier about what other ecological testing do we do or biological testing do we do. That was part of this, and probably the best time to make it.
Could not agree more. So there was a question raised with the individual in the hat back there, or was back there. What kind of biological evaluations have we done with our, yeah, sorry, back there, sorry. First of all, to get our NIPDs from our discharge permit at Standing Stone, not only do we have to demonstrate and provide all the information about our process, all the data, et cetera, but you have to submit what's called a whole effluent toxicity analysis. And essentially that analysis is required by the DEP, okay? That analysis is comprised of taking effluent from your process, sending it to a certified lab that specializes in this wet test, the acronym is used, and they basically take your effluent and put biological organisms in that material. They'll put, and this is all standard methodology, they'll put like Daphnia, which is a water flea, think how sensitive that is, right? Minnows, other biological organisms, and they test to see the mortality of that set of organisms in that water. This is industry standard. It's not just for companies like us. We not only did that for Standing Stone, provided, to be honest, really good results from our wet test. That's part of the DEP being comfortable in giving us that discharge permit and renewing that permit, by the way. We also did that and submitted that as part of this application for this plant. So that there could not be a better direct answer to your question in the back on what is the potential impacts of our effluent to biological organisms. That is the most intensive test you can possibly do. I mean, you're basically putting an organism in an entire volume of our water, and it's literally drinking and breathing the water. I mean, I'm not laughing at it, I'm just saying it's a very intense test.
And you're doing two things. One, you're seeing if they can live in it, and then secondly, you're seeing if they can reproduce successfully.
Correct.
So there are two separate tests. One is for water fleas and one is for fathead minnows. Those are the two species used because of the sensitivity of those particular organisms.
Correct.
If they can survive, most any other freshwater fish in the area can. So these are the tests that we ran on the effluent, and we did it at different levels. Generally, you do it at 25% your effluent, 50, 75, 100. We ran it at all four. At all four, we had between 95 and 100% success rate, which matched or was better than the controls that we used.
To simplify this, I've been made aware that by the DEP individual I'm working with on the NIPD for the discharge permit, that our full application for our discharge permit is now online on the DEP website. Okay, that just went live I think last Friday or Thursday. In that application we had to submit, which is online and viewable 100% by the public, is our wet test that we submitted for this plant. Which, by the way, we use water that we generated from a plant we've been operating for 7 years. So, the reason why I brought that up, go to our website, look at the report, you'll see how well that test went with our water. So, if there, for example, if there's a concern on the fact that we're removing too many minerals and actually over-treating, then we would not have passed that test. Those organisms would have died, the DEP, and there would have been bad results. DEP would have absorbed those results and said, well, no, you can't operate this plant as you're proposing. So it's black and white, look at the data, we can work with anybody who wants to look at it together. Anyways.
So the question would be, what does it mean 95% success rate? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, they measure, okay, on the reproductive rate and on the living in the water rate. It's like putting a goldfish in water, right? Some of them are going to live and some of them don't. But anyway, it's a measurement. And what they do is they have a control, and they compare the control to the actual experiment, and they just compare the two. So when you look at the data, at least all the data that I've looked at on our effluent, you had a 95% success rate of living and reproducing it, or better than what we were seeing in the control water. And the control water is water that's taken out of the stream or water that's taken.
So how long did they survive and reproduce for?
They only run the test for, do you know how many months it is, Gerald?
No, I don't. I will say this, the methodology that's used for that test is used for every discharger in the country, not even oil and gas. So that is a standard method question.
So are you saying that 95% of the life, the water life survived for several months?
What I'm saying is
what does that mean?
When you compare the control, which is those particular organisms in control water in an experiment, to those organisms in ours, the results were the same or better in ours than they were in the control. That's what I'm saying. So the 95% was what they survived in both waters. They survived, 95% of them survived in the control water, 95% of them survived in our water. It was identical, if not better in all cases.
And the control water is what? The source
Whatever water, the
from the creek?
biological testing.
Biological
agency
water?
decides to use.
From that standard.
Typically lived in.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think we're almost done. Sorry. We talked about waste, so that's one we got out of order on. A little bit of talk about the co-product I did earlier. These are the co-products Eureka makes. Sodium chloride will be made and dried at this new facility in Dimock, assuming we build it. It will be shipped 1 tractor trailer load a day to Standing Stone to be packaged, palletized, and distributed by our distribution partner. We talked about the water. 94,000 gallons a day is how much water we'll make out of 2,800 barrels of produced water. It's going to be reused by producers or discharged to a service stream. Concentrated calcium chloride brine, 23,000 gallons a day. That basically is 30% concentration of calcium chloride, a lesser concentration of lithium. That goes to Standing Stone, PA. We extract the calcium, dry it, package it for de-icing. We extract the lithium, convert it to a lithium byproduct for sale for what we talked about earlier. Methanol. Methanol comes in from producers in this region in the winter, in some level in their water, and also from the gathering companies like Williams Pipeline, some of whose water will likely come to this plant. Here in the winter, usually it runs from about November till about now. Methanol concentrations are elevated. There's 2 ways we deal with it. We extract it and sell it back to them, or we devour it, use it as food for our biological system that's treating the water. Conclusions we got here. Eureka Resources is the only company with greater than 13 years experience doing what we do, because we're the only ones that we're up in the world that are doing it. Marcellin-based producers with a desire to be environmental leaders in PA and get out of that cycle of just reusing water over and over again and storing lots of residual waste and water for reuse. Should be and are becoming convinced to come to a place like Eureka so that something a lot better than just reusing their water can be done with it. We strive to be a good neighbor by processing wastewater in the most sustainable and environmentally responsible ways. There's the only typo in the thing I saw. Responsible ways, okay? Why do I say sustainable and responsible? We've talked about that before. Because we can do it every day, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. We don't need them to take anything back because it's nothing. So all we need from them is their produced water, and all that waste that they bring us gets turned into something else except sludge.
It's a pretty bad typo, isn't it?
Yeah. Our facilities produce critical minerals necessary for the long-term transformation to a non-oil and gas economy, which is going to happen over some period of time. Even the worst pundit is going to say, over time, sometime, some of us will be dead, I will be. That's happening over a long period of time. But one of the best sources for America to get the lithium we need, okay, in the meantime, and the energy we need to develop those non-carbon-based energy sources is right here, and it's trapped in this wastewater. And our mission is to get it out of there. Okay?
What's your total investment in producing the plant?
I'll do better than that. We've invested $85 million to date in 3 facilities we have. $85 million of private money. We got one state grant from the Department of Pennsylvania in 2019 for $1.5 million. We're still working through the red tape that's required to actually get that $1.5 million worth of money. We've applied for another one for this facility. Whether we build this facility or not, whether we get that $1.5 million isn't important. The facility in Dimock, and I mentioned it earlier, will cost $30 million more. The expansion in Bradford County, which is necessary to make Dimock work, will be another $30 million. And coincidentally, We're going to put a crystallizer like we're going to install here at Dimock down in Lycoming County, because again, we're trying to take our volume, we're trying to expand, but we have to expand as close to each of our operator groups as we can, because none of them want to truck the water even an hour. They want to truck the water less than an hour if it's all possible. That's why you got to build plants of this size instead of a lot bigger. Why? Well, Pennsylvania doesn't allow you to like residual waste in the pipe.
Are you able to release the investors, the names of your investors? Is that public?
You can see who invests on our website. There's an equity group, and then there's some of us, I can say I'm one of them. Okay, some gentlemen here in this room are, but I can't release the names of the folks who are invested in the equity group.
Can I have a very simple question?
Okay, one second.
The cost of plant, physical structure, and 100 jobs, the people who construct the plant, are they going to be local or are they outsourced? In other words, your plant in Wysox, was that constructed by a local company or a company that's someplace else in the state?
No, I'll give you the answer. I can tell you who the contractors were. We bid our projects out because we're private money. We don't have anybody who's in our back pocket who does it. The site work at Standing Stone was done by a company called Bishop Brothers. I don't know if anybody knows them. They did it. Wysox, lime and gravel they own. They did all the site work. That was the single largest piece of the contract, with the exception of the purchase of the equipment. The equipment's a big piece. The building and land is probably $5 to $8 million. All the rest is equipment. The biggest equipment supplier is a company from Switzerland. They don't manufacture anything anymore in Switzerland, but they manufacture some in the U.S., some in Spain, wherever. But we use local contractors as much as we can. But we did it. Yep, we did it.
Same thing for purchasing with not the technical equipment, but the other stuff needed in building the facility.
Right.
Is every effort being made to purchase that in a local?
Purchase in Pennsylvania, USA, yes.
Yeah, mentioned locally. Our capital, there's also additional part.
Yeah, any money that the state grants us, we have to do. We have to be made in USA. You have to put. By the way, they set some of the rules in, so I'm not necessarily a gigantic fan of the state setting a rule for me on that. Somebody had a question back here.
Right here.
Okay.
I have a very simple question. Nothing's perfect. I'm going to assume this is not perfect as well. What is wrong with it that you don't want us to know?
Well, what's wrong with our plant that I don't want you to know? You got the answer to that, anybody?
I got a stab at that. I will admit, this is a complicated process. We're not rolling it out saying that we've never built one. We have our lessons that we've learned, okay, and how to operate these plants smoothly and maintain our equipment and whatnot. I think that's one thing we can offer and say, look, this is not as simple as putting water through a filter or letting solids settle in a tank and having waste go off. We're imparting significant treatment levels to this water that's way above and beyond anybody else, and I'm proud to say that. So it's the complexity, I would say. We have to have sharp operators. We have to have really good training. We have to have really good EHS policies and safety policies. That is a constant in our lives, all of our lives. The managers in this room, our operators, down to our maintenance people. So it's complicated. That's the answer, and that's my answer.
So what's the downside?
What's the downside? I'll give you the downside from our customer's perspective, and this may be a lightning to all you. They have to commit to us. Okay, a producer that's bringing us water, they have to commit to bring us a certain amount of water on average every day for a minimum of 5 years, because the plant costs so much money to build. So I'm not building, no offense to anybody else at McDonald's, I'm not building a McDonald's that bigger people will come, because the McDonald's costs, $2 million to build today, not $35 million. So our customers have to commit to us under contract to bring X amount of water on average every single day, every single month, for a minimum of 5 years, or we don't have a business. And you might say, well, why don't you just build it if it's so good? Because we understand who we're dealing with. Okay, so we need a commitment from them, okay, to bring us the water, because we need to make the co-product. That's the other thing that's not perfect. If the minerals are not in the water, okay, for us to recover, then we can't make any money. So there's also a water spec that our customers have to guarantee. They have to tell us some pretty wide specification. It's like if you have a tire in your car, you got to bring it to me while there's still between an 1/8 and 3/4 of a tread on it, or I won't take it back from you. Well, we have a water spec for the same thing, because we have to know approximately what kind of minerals we're going to recover, or else we can't make any money. If they're not paying us enough, okay, then it's treated as charge to do what we do.
How much money do you expect to make for a year? And how much money do you expect to make for a year? And how much do you give back to the community?
I can't disclose to you how much we're going to make a year, but we fully intend to be a good neighbor and give back to the community. I can tell you this, in Williamsport for 8 years, when we opened our first plant, when the government decided, you guys will remember this, that they weren't going to provide security for Little League Baseball anymore, through the state police, Eureka stepped up and paid for it for 2 years. So we'll do things like that, and we're currently looking at some projects that are partially funded here in Susquehanna County that we'd like to contribute to. I just got wind of a good one today, but I can't disclose it right now, but it's a stream restoration project, and it's partially funded. And we'd like to jump in and participate, for instance, in funding the restoration of a stream or a stream bank. You know, we're kind of in the water business, so that would make sense for us to participate in. We also participated in giving to United Way in this county a bunch of years, and also to another couple fundraising events that were discontinued here in the last 2 years because of what we're all living through when they come back. But when we're here, in real time, and you'll see our name in the paper on some special, there'll be environmental projects that'll be related to a stream or a forest or some kind of habitat restoration.
And don't forget the water line to the Dimock families. Water line.
Any other questions? Yeah, what I'm going to do, the township has my number. I'm going to leave a whole bunch of business cards up there. You can call my cell number, but I don't want to get 98 calls tomorrow. But there's an office number there. Our plant is open tomorrow and Thursday at 11 o'clock for tours. All you need to do is come to those and show up, because we're already scheduled to be open. Okay, 4 tours at that time. The plant's operating, so it's not like people can just walk off the street and come in anytime, because somebody has to be there to talk to you that's not worried about running the plant. It'll be made for one of these 2 gentlemen, Kevin Timmons, who talked for a little bit, Chris Crunch, our CFO, Tim Butters, our VP of Sales, and Carol, our VP of Engineering. The next 2 days we'll be there, and we'll be giving tours from 11 to 2. Okay? And then we'll set up another batch of tours. I meant Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday and Wednesday. Okay? So you're welcome to come then. We appreciate a call at the office so we know you're coming, so we can be prepared. But we will set up, in this township will know it, we'll set up another batch of tours probably in 2 weeks. Okay? Our doors are really always open. I just have to know people are coming, because if I don't, there's just not anybody there prepared. It takes about 2 hours to really get what you need to get out of it. You were there today. This gentleman was there with me earlier last week. It takes about 2 hours to do it justice to the block we do.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay?